Today's podcast is brought to you by Lake Effect Jiu-Jitsu. Lake Effect is your friendly neighborhood jiu-jitsu school. They provide top-notch martial arts coaching for all ages, including kids class, youth class, adult fundamental, and intermediate Brazilian jiu-jitsu for gi and no-gi grappling. This is an incredible service that promotes self-defense, self-confidence, and self-growth. We are also brought to you by Marquette's only heated yoga studio offering vinyasa and power classes. Tulavesi Yoga's mission is to empower you to live your best life and foster a sense of connection to self and the community. These are two local businesses that I truly believe in and help make all of what I do possible. Without any further delay, here's the podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome to Information Operation. I'm Connor Ryan, and we're coming at you from Marquette, Michigan, bringing you your locally sourced ideas, thoughts, and inquiries. Today on the podcast, we have Scott Drum. He is a Ph.D. in sports science from University of Northern Colorado. He's a current professor in sports science at Northern Michigan University, a competitive runner and endurance athlete, also an avid exploration climber and mountaineer. Scott is a great example of a lifelong learner and teacher, so it is with great honor I have to introduce Scott Drum. So you started running at age 10.
Yes.
And what was the first thing that sparked your love for running?
Yeah, that's something that I debate. It's the whole nature nurture side of things. So I think it was pretty natural. And it was a bit of modeling too. So there's that nurture part of it with your parents or your father taking you out.
Yeah.
But my brother and I probably had, and since I'm an exercise physiology guy, I can tell you we had pretty good natural ability. And
Okay.
so when you start doing well early on, you tend to stick with it. But really loved the competition and was successful, and then it just kept going from there.
Right on. And how was that different from conventional sports for you? Were you ever into any other conventional sports?
No, tried middle school, tried the football, a little bit of basketball, wrestling.
Yeah.
But by third grade, became a runner. Still
Jeez.
dabbled, but pretty much solid running at age 10.
That's incredible. Just stuck with it. And did that continue through your high school and college career as well?
It did, but I was never as successful as I was in college as I was in high school.
Okay. And what was the main difference between college and high school running for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, I won quite a bit in high school,
Uh-huh.
and everything felt natural, and it was a 8-year natural progression of feeling successful, new personal records every year, age 10 to age 18. Then I entered college and plateaued. And so again, being an exercise science guy, I kind of analyzed that maybe too much.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, I realized that later on it became a lifestyle. And so when I got to college, the big difference was I had to learn to love running again, and I did. But I wasn't winning anymore. In fact, I was middle of the pack, and
Gotcha.
even back there.
So what were your biggest accomplishments, would you say?
In high school,
Just
college.
overall running competitive career.
Well, for me, it happened. 3 Wisconsin State high school championships were fun. When you're in that natural progression, and 1 cross country, and then 2 in track and the 2 mile. But probably the biggest thing for me is having stayed with it. And
Right.
I can compete regionally and whatnot. Whether I'm in the Midwest or in the West, I can do a trail run or a road race. And so those things actually I really enjoy is being able to compete with some of the best in the region, and knowing that I'm not going to be a national class type of runner, but just really enjoying the camaraderie is probably my biggest accomplishment now.
What do you think about when you run?
Just whatever pops into my mind.
Uh-huh.
If it's a hard run, for instance, you tend not to think about anything but running hard and how you feel, checking in with your breathing and any soreness or any uh, your brain telling you to stop. But for the most part, just creative stuff, whether it's a song you've heard or maybe even if there's a research problem, I'll think about that a little bit and just it's a nice way to let anything enter your mind, and so it's really free flowing.
How would you explain a flow state?
In part, feeling of euphoria, less fatigue, no muscle pain, and feeling like all of your body and mind are in sync. And
Yeah.
so that's probably more of an Eastern medicine slant to it. But it comes, and again, we can call it many different things, but it's where you can shift gears and move and feel like you don't have any fatigue, and the mind and body are in flow, especially when you're moving. And I think of flow states when I'm moving in the mountains and doing something strenuous.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that, but for
And
me, that's what it is.
and it kind of relies on your intuition when you're making decisions. I mean, you don't think about the decision in front of you. It just kind of unfolds and you react to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can be when you're in a flow state too with decision making. It's very natural, and it might be that you're in a flow state with a group dynamic. You know,
Hmm.
there's lots of give and take. You're trying to choose. Like even doing this mountain adventure book, I right away think I hope we have a good flow state together. You know, and so that's
Right.
different connotation than a physical flow state, but it's having banter and it's having just a naturalness about you when your body is well trained. You're not overly fatigued. We might go back to having a good diet and the right amount of sleep.
Yeah.
You can pretty much put yourself in a clear, let's say, stable blood sugar,
Yeah.
which would lead to a clear mindset. And if you have all those other things in balance, then it's very easy to put yourself into a flow state to have your nervous system, your reactions to certain things in sync. And it can be, you can feel, people, you might describe it as feeling it in the gut or the stomach. And that's what I think is so cool about potentially living a very deliberate life where you can set yourself up for, feeling that way.
What about the use of performance enhancing drugs? Does that exist in the distance running realm?
Oh, 100%. Hard to detect a lot
Yeah.
of the time. You've heard about the Tour de France issues.
Yeah. What is
Um,
that about? For people who don't know exactly scientifically what Lance Armstrong was doing, could you explain that?
well, yeah, in a nutshell, he was increasing his hemoglobin mass by putting in an extra pint
Blood
of
doping.
blood. Yes,
Blood doping.
yes,
Right.
yeah, and
How does
so
that work?
increased oxygen carrying capacity. And if you read Tyler Hamilton's book, it was really interesting. And a lot of these Tour de France guys, he's somebody that rode with Lance,
Hmm.
and others. You don't necessarily feel perceived effort is potentially the same. And so when you're blood doping or you have extra O2 carrying
Yeah.
capacity with this extra pint of blood, you have to still be well trained, but you feel like you're at max, but you just keep going.
Right.
And that's what these guys would do, and it's really a cool description.
But physically, you're taking blood out, you're waiting a period of time,
About a month,
about a month, and then you're pumping blood back
putting that back in at a strategic point in a
in
race.
the competition because these races are days long.
Yeah, like the Tour de France is 3 weeks.
Huh.
So it allows for recovery to potentially you can be what's the term, death on a stick,
Yeah.
bonking on one day, have a blood transfusion of putting your own pint back in, or there's other ways to actually increase hemoglobin mass, but
Now
but
there's
that helps with performance the next day.
I got you. The hemoglobin.
Mass, yeah, yeah.
Now this can be done legally too through altitude training.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
in a way, yeah, it's not as potentially effective, but natural altitude at about 73, 7,500 feet for about a month, you can increase hemoglobin mass, and that's a legal form of, or a legal way to do that.
Have you done that before?
I've lived at altitude, yeah.
But did you altitude train for a competition and then
No,
and
no,
then go
not
do it?
no, not on purpose. No,
Okay.
but I lived in Colorado for 12 years and
Yeah.
would travel back to the Midwest and really feel good. And but there's other things that go on with altitude, lower velocity of
Right.
training. So I could feel like Superman at
Sea level.
sea level, yeah, but I wouldn't run as fast.
It's
So
kind of
I've
interesting.
experimented with that, yeah. So
But a lot of athletes do. They believe in that. Going to
well,
altitude and then competing at sea level.
oh, it works. It works. Yeah, because they're maintaining. I don't maintain a really specific regimen to maintain
Yeah.
speed at altitude, and so these guys, if they're world class and they're using it for 4 weeks,
Yeah.
it really is effective.
Do you have any questions that science has not yet answered about exercise and sports science?
Yeah, in class, and you may have come across this, Connor, with um, the newest thing right now is still the sub 2 hour marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And the prediction of being able to do that related to VO2 max, lactate threshold, and running economy. And so there's a predictive equation using those variables and some constants that would hint at there's the possibility and some even graphs that if you look at them and extrapolate them, I think it's why can't we break for the male 2 hour marathon. And Nike did something that was really cool with a real contrived setup, and they almost broke two. Wouldn't be a world record. It wasn't on a sanctioned course.
Okay.
But that's the great question is how.
How can we do it?
And for me, it's what's really fascinating. Yeah, is how many. What's the average per minute mile? About 4:35 to break 2 hours.
Okay, wait.
Can somebody do
Say
that?
that again. Say that one more time.
4 minutes and 35 seconds per mile for 26.2 miles to break 2 hours for the marathon.
And that's considered to be possible in the future.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
Some graphs would have you see, or if you're extrapolating in the early 2020s, maybe 2035, and
That is outrageous.
but drafting is the number one thing. You gotta be able to draft well. Everybody's got good running economy, good VO2 max, and good lactate threshold.
Right.
But I think the number one thing that what was cool what Nike came up with was
The draft.
drafting, 4% roughly.
Right.
Even shoes
That's crazy.
can offer that.
Are some of these questions the reason, like, why you got into your field?
Well, for me, it was always about human performance as a
Mm-hmm.
runner. So I think a lot of people that get into running, some or if they're a runner and have
Yeah.
gotten into or whatever sport, we tend to think about how can we mesh that into a career. And so I was always interested. When I found out exercise physiology, exercise science was a major, I really gravitated. Took me a couple of years though. I was going to be a business person or a biologist, and
Yeah.
then I found human performance.
Tell me a little bit about the 5 years of real world experience that you did. I mean, what did that entail?
The one thing that I learned in my 5 years was that I wanted to be my own boss.
Yeah.
And so going back to school, I always really loved teaching and started doing that at Wake Forest
Yeah.
as a grad assistantship. And then so decided I'm going to go back and try to take things to a different level
Right.
and be um, my own person in the
You know,
classroom. Yeah.
live for your own dreams rather than some corporation's dreams or some facility's
Yeah,
dreams.
and yeah, you're right about that because hospitals can be an interesting administrative quagmire.
Yeah.
Not good, not bad.
Yeah.
But any job, if you after a while aren't enjoying what you're doing, I think it's time to reevaluate.
And that's an irreplaceable value. I mean, you couldn't have learned that in school.
Correct. I think some of the biggest things I've learned, when is working in the real world, and yeah, just trying to take what you've applied take what you've learned and then applying that is always or can be difficult because
Right.
everybody has a different viewpoint which you have to allow.
Right.
And so for me, I never had a problem in the real world. It was a lot of fun. I just didn't feel like I had found my niche, and the academic world had always called, and so that's when I went back to school.
Gotcha. And where do you think that shows most when professionals of your caliber don't have that real world experience?
Well, I think would be an anecdotal. It's we can all guess sometimes, or we can read. But I think for me, when I'm in the classroom and I talk about a certification, for instance, I had some when I came out of Wake Forest, and that's what helped me get a job, for instance.
Yeah.
What's it like to begin an 8 to 5, 9 to 5 kind of job? What are some things to expect from bosses or from coworkers?
Yeah.
I know how that feels after 5 years. And then I know enough, now that I know enough to know that I don't know everything. And so, but having worked in the real world helps me let kids know that a lot of their learning, they're getting the basics in the classroom. Oops. And they're gonna learn a whole lot more on the
Right.
job.
And extrapolate on those
Yeah,
principles,
yeah,
just the very core principles, it seems.
yeah. What do you think, Connor? My question would be,
Definitely.
what do you think? Because you're
A senior.
all applied.
Yeah.
I mean, not all applied, but I mean, you like to, you've done a lot of personal training and so forth. So
Yeah.
outside the classroom, when you're doing stuff outside the classroom now, and you've done a lot,
Hmm.
um, where did you learn that? Not necessarily, you've got the basics in the classroom, but it's
Yeah.
always interesting. You're somebody that seems really natural at picking up and running with different ideas outside the classroom.
Yeah, I would have to say that has a lot to do with being able to apply knowledge. The knowledge is attained in textbooks or a classroom from a mentor. And then you have to go out and apply that knowledge, and you have to consistently apply that knowledge. Otherwise, it doesn't stick. It's just information, it's just words in your head. Until you go out in the world and you talk to people and you interact with the world and you
Hmm.
see what works and what doesn't work. That's very important to find out what doesn't work and to fail at something and to think about it a little bit harder when you go to sleep at night and be like, what did I do wrong? That's when you really start to make progress. That's when you really start to grow as a professional, I think, is when you have those ebbs and flows, right?
Hmm.
Where you question what you're doing, where you make mistakes, and where you have successes. I think it's important to branch out and start applying that knowledge.
How did you learn to think for yourself?
Wrestling, I'd say, it made me unafraid of what people thought because it was just it was almost primitive to just do what I thought was right, and I wasn't afraid of anybody. I wasn't afraid of what anybody thought.
So, and that's why, because you asked a great question about learning outside the classroom.
Hmm.
And you see, like I said, you're very good at picking things up and running with them. And so you're gonna say, and I think that's cool that wrestling and the individuality that comes
Uh-huh.
with that helps you. So my other question is, it's always a fun one, and I know it seems like I'm interviewing you now,
Good.
but
I've
but
had comments on the podcast that
mhm.
they people don't hear enough about me. It's
Ah,
just an interview about other people,
you
and
should probably turn the tables.
I've had people say like, "You're cool too," we want to hear about you, so I'm open to it.
Well, I just good because my the whole nature and nurture. Do you feel like it feels to me like you have natural instincts to question things, and you'll learn that knowledge in the classroom, but you have really in this innate ability. It's almost I'm almost answering my own question, but what I see in you, maybe you see it different. That's what my
Hmm.
question is. I see it more as a natural thing. It's almost you're not modeling yourself after somebody. You just innately, naturally try to do something different and act.
Definitely. I think that we all have gifts, and since an early age, I've been around adults, and I've had the gift of conversation, like being able to just
Mhm.
talk to somebody and not be afraid to ask questions, right?
Good.
When I was a freshman in college, I was annoying people with how many questions I would ask. I would be in
Mm.
an anatomy class with 150 people, and I would just raise my hand, maybe five, six 10 times a class and just ask questions. And I didn't really care what people thought, you know. I was just because I value it. This is my education. I'm gonna take advantage of it. You know, I'm paying for this. Um,
Good. Good for you.
but yeah, nature, I would say it is in my nature. But nurture, Patty Hogan is one of my professors, and she told me that will stick with something that will stick with me for the rest of my life, and that is think outside the box. Okay, there's
Yeah.
boxes. There's strength and conditioning. There's running. There is wrestling. There is, you know, martial arts. There's different boxes that I fall into. Yeah, yoga now. Yoga is a new box that I'm falling into, and if you can master a box, which is possible, all you need is knowledge, application, and
Mhm.
consistency of applying that knowledge. And if you can do that and you can master something, that allows you to now put your boxes together. You can multiply them, or you can think outside the box that you know to be true and create your own box. And that's all I'm doing is just creating my own box. You know, taking what I
Mhm.
know and then morphing it into who I want to be.
I think, yeah, that's, and see, so to me, when again, I think that's awesome. And I think part of the learning is you, more than a lot of students that I even know sometimes, you think outside that box, but you also actually take to heart some of the suggestions.
Hmm.
And Dr. Patty Hogan is a great person to emulate. And I think that's what's important. We all need to just listen
Yeah,
to what people are saying, and then and when there's certain experiences or experience levels, take note. You know, when you hear stuff, and yeah, there's a lot of noise sometimes, an artifact, but
yeah.
it's picking what resonates best, and I think you do that well.
Thanks, Scott. What do you think most kids are missing when they leave college?
Practical experience, real world, hands on. So I think I can use an example of outdoor education right now with Dr. Scott Jordan and Dr. Jackie Medina, and having helped with some of the internships.
Hmm.
And all kids in our degrees have the ability to do that in the School of Health and Human Performance. And it's, if individuals have their own initiative, and we will suggest as well, probably every individual should try to do that, where they do an internship and then they're offered a job. And so I've seen that in the outdoor education, recreation field, and the practical experiences that these individuals are having, and that's actually part of their curriculum to graduate.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into a curriculum and so forth. So again, it's not a right or wrong. It's trying to us as advisors, and even on a case by case basis, trying to get kids to be more practical, do an independent study, even a 1 credit
Yeah.
or 2 credit. Doesn't have to be a full blown semester long internship,
Yeah.
but or volunteering to be a subject, in a
Killer.
study, or but it's that don't just be a butt in a seat.
Hmm.
And so I come back to, personally, what can we do in trying to individually influence students
Yeah.
and suggest that they attempt to do something that's outside their comfort zone.
What was your like first move when you left college? You got the whole world in front of you, and what was your mission right out the gate?
Yeah, that's another really great question. I'd have to say, for me, enjoy my job. I was looking for something that was meaningful.
Yeah.
And so I alluded to that 5 years. I didn't quite find it till I went
Yeah.
back to school to
And you
to
thought
to be in education.
you want to be a professor not until you return for your PhD?
Correct. Yeah, probably the last year of my 5 years, what I call out in the real world, before starting my PhD in 2000. I worked 1995 to 2000, doing those jobs that job in Montana and
Yeah.
Seattle, and live for the weekend. And so my big thing was not necessarily to save the world,
Yeah.
but was to have lots of colorful experiences, and the
Yeah.
mountains were part of that. But I wanted my job to also be a cornerstone of what I enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so when you start, if you're getting into philosophy, when you start living more for the weekends because there's so much to do out west.
Hmm.
Individually for me, it was very pleasing to have the mountains and to do these different things. And the job wasn't as fruitful.
Hmm.
You start to some balancing, or the checks and balances occur, and you try to decide, okay, well now, do I want to save the world,
Yeah.
and where do I go?
Yeah. Where do you go? And that's kind of where we started. What brought you to Marquette? Coming back to it. We're
Yeah,
a
and
little further now.
well, the job, yeah. So
Yeah.
I had 8 years in a tenure track and tenured position at Western State
Okay.
Colorado University. Absolutely loved that job, loved that area. Felt like I was a little green. I did take 5 years of the 8 years at Western to finish my Ph.D.
Hmm.
And so when I finally finished, I decided, or I felt like I was a little bit green. So I thought, well, I'll look a little bit and see if I can find something um, where I can get some mentorship
Hmm.
and help not only with undergraduate program but with a graduate program. And so Dr. Phil Watts had caught my eye years before I applied here
Yeah.
with his rock climbing physiology. I wrote a book chapter on that. And so when the job came open here at around 2012, I decided to throw my hat in the ring because I knew there was an established rock climbing non-traditional research physiology
Yeah.
niche and also undergraduate and graduate. And so you tend to want to try to better yourself.
Yeah.
And so and I close to home as well.
Yeah.
And so that's a bonus.
And you were interested in doing more research.
Yeah, yeah, and the non-traditional exercise part of that caught my eye.
What is research? What does it do? What's the purpose of it?
Well, the scientific method is evidence based. So
Right.
research is hopefully setting up a good research question and then figuring out the best methodology that's not with no confounding variable. And so you're doing stuff in a very standardized manner, and then your research statistically manipulated. Can you say, does it have enough power
To prove something.
to exactly, a control situation versus your intervention?
Okay.
And it might be something that's controversial, but you're going to prove systematically, evidence based, that with X, then you get Y.
Scott, you're so good with your words. Let's say we're
Maybe
on
I'm not making sense, but it,
let's say we're on the street, right? And I
yeah,
say, "Hey Scott, what's exercise science?" What do you say?
it is the study of human movement and how that affects one's health.
Okay.
And it can be health or performance.
Do you think that method, the way that you just broke it down, does that consider any Eastern methodology of, I mean, in this Western world, we're very focused on the cut and dry. Do you think it even considers some of the practices that Eastern methodology considers to be important for movement and health and human performance?
Well, yeah, I think it's considered, and it's something that I feel we should teach a lot more of. We should integrate that.
Yeah.
It's not personally my background, but it's
Right.
something that I would be totally open to.
Right. It just doesn't seem like it's part of the curriculum. I mean, I've experienced a little bit of it, but it's not part of my curriculum so
Yeah,
far. Why do you think that is?
I think it goes back to the focus of the faculty again. So it's interesting when you have to ask that. It's sometimes who has an interest in it, and if you're going to branch into that, potentially hire someone or make that a niche. You can make that
Yeah.
a concentration. And what I was getting at before, you might have an exercise physiologist, a sports psychologist,
Okay.
a nutritionist, a biomechanist, on your staff as
Right.
faculty. And then you might even have an Eastern medicine person.
Right. So tell me about your sabbaticals too. I'm interested in what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, my main focus is calling it a mountain adventure trail run book, and it's a project. But my main thing is to gather data while doing 25 classic mountain adventure runs of North America, and they're personal runs that I'm inspired by. And so I'll wear with two partners, husband-wife team actually,
Yeah.
former student and her husband are going to help with chronicling these 25 adventure runs. And what we're going to do is wear a Garmin or a
Yeah.
Suunto watch,
Yeah.
yeah, and look at biometric data while running these various routes. And they're rugged, average 22
Right.
miles, 4,600 feet elevation gain
Where?
all over Maine to Washington to New Mexico to
Are you serious?
Colorado.
You
Yeah,
and three people are gonna travel around the North American elevation points, right?
anything with mountains. Marquette's on the map because of the Huron Mountains. Our 10-mile loop here is I'm calling it a classic, and I do this quotes classic
Yeah.
because um, I designated the runs and it's arbitrary, and
Yeah.
so they're of interest to me. And they're not the classics. They can become classics, but they're supposed to be rugged
Right.
but attainable for just about anybody who has a healthy desire to complete one or all.
Gotcha. And what are you aiming to prove
Well,
with the study?
yeah, that's a good question. It's part study, part just good nonfiction, and writing about each of the 25 runs will be its own chapter.
Okay.
And I'll have a breakdown of average heart rate, VO2 max based on this technology, step rate, step count, stride frequency, perceived effort, and then just general tales from the trails, how to get there, meeting maybe some local runners. I'm
Oh
trying to
man,
look that up.
that's gonna be
Um,
sick.
but wait a minute, we'll do VO2 max, lactate threshold, and running economy
Okay.
testing in the lab.
Yeah.
And this wearable technology watches with a chest strap, we can then say, or try to look at and determine if this wearable technology is accurate.
So you're testing Garmin watches essentially to see if they work.
And Suunto, yeah, and they work. They're great products.
Yeah.
We want to see how well, and I think they're going to do fine if we're wearing a chest strap with heart rate. Sometimes just the wrist heart rate technology can be a little bit off, but it's really good these days. But we'll look at the percent VO2 max, percent lactate threshold that a lot of this wearable technology tries to bring into the equation. And
Right.
it's probably fairly accurate, but
VO2 max.
percent wise, yeah, height, weight, age, you can plug in resting heart rate,
Right.
sleeping patterns.
I'm skeptical. I'm
Oh yeah,
excited to see how the results turn out. What are your
yeah.
living conditions gonna be like? What are you doing? How are you gonna shower? How are you gonna eat? You gonna stay in hotels the whole time?
Van life.
Yeah?
So our goal is to, and Carly and Tyler Gugamis are the two that I'm husband and wife. I call them the dynamic endurance duo,
Mm-hmm.
online triathlon coach extraordinaire, or endurance coaches, very successful athletes and coaches. And so they have a van, Sprinter van life.
And you're gonna join
Um,
them? Or are you gonna get your own?
well, we're looking at attempting to find a sponsor or two.
Cool.
So we'll see how that goes. But I think it's really important for the three of us to be traveling together in the
Mm-hmm.
same vehicle so we can run ideas past one another.
That sounds awesome. Quite the adventure.
Oh yeah, I don't. I
That
wish my
sounds,
wife could go,
yeah,
but she may join us for some of that. So I have her blessing though, so that's important.
definitely. That sounds like more of that real world experience.
Absolutely, and writing about it, and I'll qualify the whole thing. You might look up authors are Steck and Roper, and they wrote a book I think in 1982. I was just looking it up on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
50 classic climbs of North America. It's still this book that's alive today. And I think there was a husband and wife team out of Crested Butte, Colorado, that I knew that were trying to be the first um, persons to climb all
Yeah,
50.
yeah.
And so that book, I've known about it for decades, has always inspired me to think about writing something such as mountain adventure running. And instead of doing 50, it can be 25
Yeah.
classic. So it's not it, but so I have an inspiration behind the idea of the sabbatical and the book I'm going to write.
What do you think makes you cut out to do it?
No, I have the dream outside the box.
Outside the box. That's all it takes,
Yeah,
right?
I think you just got to try. I don't know if I may not run all of them,
Hmm.
but at least that's why there's three of us, and so and we didn't, and on purpose, like I said, I mean, I tried to pick things that were attainable and not 100 milers from actually, in fact, from 10 to 50 miles, and
Yeah.
one is local to Marquette. One run is national parks they're in, so
Right.
one is in Zion, Traverse. I think that was the longest one at 53 miles in one push.
I wouldn't be able to join you for that, Scott.
Could put you in a backpack.
50.
We could push you in a buggy.
That's gnarly. I could be on my mountain bike maybe. But
Yeah, yeah.
along the lines of the Garmin watches, how have you seen exercise progress over the years? I mean, we started with Barb Coleman, step aerobics, and now we're at CrossFit and sport-specific training with barbell movements. And how has that come so far in so little time?
What's funny is I'm not sure if it's come so far. I think we're recycling common themes, and that's my bias of cross training, for instance, or circuit weight training, body weight training.
Hmm.
I think we're coming up with new ways to catch people's attention, but I think it's just the same old overload, if I could go that route. It's the same specificity, same overload. I think of the old times, Jack LaLanne. I don't know
Yeah,
if I'm saying
I
that
don't
name
know.
right, but Jane Fonda, people might be familiar with step
Yeah, of
aerobics,
course.
aerobics, body weight, moving your body, just moving. I think we have the tenets of what exercise is, and it's an overload, and it's a specificity, and it's your goal. It's got to be fun, and there's different ways to help people adhere. But and maybe what you're alluding to is the different ways that we periodize training, or we can manipulate the overloads a little bit
Yeah,
better. And I think we're doing better with Olympic lifting, with whole body movements, with understanding functional fitness. Has been around, but it hasn't been called that.
right.
So working on your balance, your reaction time, and being, um, some different trends nowadays want you to be able to react to a situation
Right,
functionally.
right. Chaos,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think that's good. I think it's
Chaotic
all good.
agility.
Yeah, but I think those things have been. I think if you look back through the history of exercise, we definitely are recycling some of the same things
It's
and
interesting.
putting new twists on them, but it's still same old sets, reps, rest. High intensity actually is that's probably the one thing, by the way, yeah, that's it's always been there, but it's better studied. High intensity interval training is the number one trend for this year.
What style do you think is optimal
Style of exercise.
exercise? Yeah.
Well,
You mentioned functional fitness, and you're saying that doesn't quite exist yet. So what
oh
what
no,
what
that it
method?
exists. No, that's what I think that does exist, and that's
Yeah.
what we're calling it. It's the balance training. It's the core strength and being able to do multiple types of reps. I think CrossFit is one of those things that
Hmm.
is fine, and it's something that you want to do the proper form with, but they've done an interesting job, great job of calling it functional fitness and being able to react to any situation. Um, but really, the best form of exercise is human movement, and
Right.
it's whatever is ideal for a person's goals or for
Hmm.
their fitness level. Um, if somebody's looking for somebody to tell them to do something, it's okay. Let's start with maybe non-weight bearing exercise to weight bearing. So with me, I'm gonna probably be more of a general answer that way. Um, but I think in general, it's pick something and go with it. And if it's not resonating, hire somebody such as a personal trainer or Connor here to show you a technique and
Yeah.
to sprinkle these different ideas into the equation.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to sound too old by saying exercise is exercise, just move. And it's hiking is a great exercise,
Right.
for
Well,
instance.
it's awesome to hear
Hmm.
somebody who studies this for a living is to just say move.
Yeah.
So if that's subjective, let's talk generally. What advice would you give somebody? One just piece of advice that they could include into their day to add
Related to
that
starting
that
an
most
exercise.
people wouldn't think of. Just across the board, elite level athletes, regular people, they don't think of this, but it's important to add to your day.
Yeah, that's a good point. Time for yourself and to reflect. If it's exercise we're talking about, to
Hmm.
reflect on being quiet and even reflecting on if you have exercised, building that intrinsic. And so it's more of a meditation point, is what I'm
Right,
saying, is
right.
actually build into the overall experience. You might focus on um, mindfulness
Yeah,
is a nice word, a buzzword nowadays, is being mindful of an exercise program, being mindful of how you feel,
that's huge.
being mindful of being healthy. And I think that that is a personal
Yeah,
statement that somebody should attempt to make, and then it grows if you practice mindfulness. Has many different connotations as
yeah. It doesn't
well.
even need to be meditation per se. Do you meditate?
I don't, but I should.
Yeah, and that's one
Yeah.
of those things that's kind of Eastern philosophy that we
Hmm.
don't talk about too much
Right.
in even the Western school of exercise.
Hmm.
It gets kind of like slipped under the rug. And call it visualization, call it focusing on what you're doing. Meditation is focusing on nothing, just the thoughts that distract you and letting them go, right?
Exactly. And I think, well, what I was envisioning was if you want to know what meditation is like, and part of it is being in your own head and controlling chatter, controlling thoughts, take a vow of silence for a month.
What? Be quiet for a month?
Yeah, it can go up.
How's that even possible in today's society? Like, especially for you, you gotta teach.
I think you have to go on a retreat to the
Yeah.
mountains in a
Wow.
Buddhist temple.
Are you gonna do that?
I should. Actually, I bring it up because a
You
former
know,
student of mine
we
has done it.
just talked about this. Never
Yeah.
say should. Replace should with could.
Yeah, yeah, I could then. Okay.
Anytime you say should, replace it with could.
Or how about I will?
Because you can't, you know?
I will.
Now, what's one thing they should take away? People in their daily life.
To me, that's an easy question.
Tell me.
It's
Sitting.
technology. Well, sitting is one, but I think where we're going is take away the um, uh, take away the iPhone.
Hmm. Is it valuable or is it all bad?
Oh, it's absolutely valuable. It's not all bad. It's how we use it, though. I think we tend to, and I'm guilty as well of looking at it all too often.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so sitting, is one of those things we talk about to move more, but I think we need to get away from our technology.
Definitely. And more into like the meditation side of things. And
Yeah.
I've learned that kind of in my yoga practice. And that brings me to something I wanted to ask you about yoga. Do you think yoga enhances performance in sports as an exercise scientist?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it can. Yeah.
How?
Well, I think it builds strength and balance
Hmm.
and core, and I think it goes back to the mindfulness. And so I know of, I mean, coaches that use that. Running coaches will use it. Other types of football.
Running is huge.
Um,
I would think stride length, right? Because how do you get faster? Stride length, stride frequency.
Potentially, yeah. That's sometimes there's never one cure all, one fix. So yoga is not gonna
Well, of course, it's not gonna.
potentially
Yeah,
be that one. I mean, it's not gonna
but
be the one thing.
but
Yeah.
it could increase stride length
It could, yeah, if that's
potentially.
something that you're specifically mindfully, can I say that?
Yeah,
Working on, and
yeah.
but I'm not sure there's a lot of evidence out there for that.
Yet
Could be yet, yeah,
could be yet.
I agree, yeah,
What about strength training? Can strength training make you potentially faster in distance running?
absolutely.
Why?
Take a look at power, take a look at strength,
Right. Ability to
resilience,
produce force.
force over time.
I feel like there's a lot of faux pas, I guess, or just critical people of saying, I don't want to get big. You know, I'm a runner. I don't want to get big. That's what they're afraid of.
They won't.
They won't.
If
They'll
they're
get
running,
strong.
focus on your running more, but also you can do 1 RMs, you can do 5 RM, you can lift
Yeah.
heavy and not put on bulk. You can lift for speed 50% of
Yeah.
a 1 RM. Evidence does show that. It's when do you do it though is always the
Yeah.
question. Is it a base training thing? Is it a preseason, in season? Usually it's base, but it depends on the individual.
Right. Did you ever have that misconception?
I did grow up with it, probably. I didn't do a lot of strength training personally. I never really bought into that it would be detrimental. I just never felt like I had the energy or the
Right.
time.
Right. Rather
Yeah,
just run.
yeah.
So do you believe in sport-specific training, or would you say it's more valuable to just go do your sport?
Oh, you have to have sport-specific training and even non-specific training, and that's and you're probably alluding to. We teach this, and the periodization, looking at a year or a 2 year or a half a year cycle, and trying to change things up a little bit. So I think that's definitely important.
And where does the role of sleep when you're training for performance, let's say sport-specific training, how does sleep fall into your priorities?
It needs to be almost number one. A lot of the time,
Yeah.
people talk about physical, psychological, and you can't have either one, I think, optimized. And I do say 100% physical, 100% mental. So it's not
Not
90% mental.
50-50.
No, it's 100% of each, but the sleep is probably number one
That's
if you're
awesome.
if you're falling off on
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what's optimal sleep? A lot of people say 8 hours. Is that true?
From what I can tell, that's if I was to pick a number with a standard deviation on it, give or take an
Yeah.
hour or so, it would be about 8.
8 hours.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there such thing as too much sleep?
Individualized, there can be, and
Mm-hmm.
usually you have to ask yourself, is that hormonal? Is it
Mm-hmm.
severe overtraining? Is it so again? Is it a clinical situation if you're overly tired and want to sleep?
Right.
If you're regimented, you should feel like 7, 8, 9 hours is perfect.
Gotcha.
And really, if you're gonna do that, make it a habit, and you'll feel better. I mean, about that. Even on the weekends, don't attempt to still go to bed on Friday, Saturday night at the same time. It's hard
Yeah.
because you want to go
Yeah.
play, and I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, you kind of want to play, but if you want your weeks to feel a little bit more regimented,
Mm-hmm.
try that. But a few hours here and there, if you're going to bed a little bit later, getting up a little bit later, that's okay.
Interesting.
Remember, moderation and moderation.
Uh, what do you mean?
Well, you need some regiment, you need some organization,
Moderation in moderation.
but you don't need to overdo
I
it.
see.
Yeah,
Become a
yeah,
perfectionist.
yeah. You can
Try to
you can.
moderate your life, everything.
Well, if you get 6 hours of sleep and you're used to 8, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, have you heard anything about the new epidemic of not silent sleepers, where people are listening to podcasts or watching TV when they fall asleep and they're leaving that on throughout the course of the night?
Have not heard about that.
It's drastically affecting people's sleep,
Hmm.
and they're not able to get into that REM 5 sleep. And I was just curious if you had any knowledge to share on that. I've kind of looked into it, and it's kind of scary. You're getting almost half the sleep that you would in that
Hmm.
8 hour time frame because you're not getting that REM 5 and you're not getting REM 4 um, when you're listening to external noise.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd have to look more into that, but
Yeah.
I could certainly see how that'd be the case.
Do you sleep
Yeah,
with your phone next to you?
I do.
You do? Do you put it on an airplane mode?
I don't, but I don't. Mine's always on silent, so I do tend to, and that was one of the things I was alluding to. Put that read print instead of your, well,
Right.
you're talking about different light situations, but I think it's nice to unwind with, reading something if you're going to bed,
Yeah.
but probably not the technology. But there's ways to deal with that with the light.
Yeah. There's one thing you might not have thought about, but there's actually Wi-Fi and satellite rays passing through your body while you sleep if you have your phone next to you.
Like within how many feet?
3 feet. You know, Wi-Fi
Ah.
Wi-Fi waves are passing through walls right now. You know, they're blasting through
Mm-hmm.
our walls,
Mm-hmm.
and that means they're blasting through our bodies as well. And there's some studies being conducted. No conclusions yet that those
Hmm.
rays, those Wi-Fi signals
Mm-hmm.
disrupt sleep.
Oh, interesting.
That is
Geez, Con, I'm
interesting.
gonna have to read up on that. I
Yeah,
like I like where you're going with it though.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some
So now I'm gonna have to put my phone in the other room because of you.
maybe.
But I don't. I mean, I don't even wake up to it.
I do. My alarm. I haven't started yet, but I should just buy an alarm clock. Go old school with it.
It's what I use. I have a Cube, 20
Hmm.
years old, alarm clock.
Now, when it comes to nutrition, I think that's another good point to bring up when you're talking about overtraining, um, and even general population. What diet works best? What have you found to be absolutely true about nutrients and how they react with the body and all these fads? They seem contradicting.
Well, I think things can be contradicting um, when you focus on one cure-all, be-all
Yeah.
type of diet, and you lose track of an overall balanced diet. And I think that's individualized again. You do have the high carb versus the low carb, and so you have a whole food plant-based diet. Maybe you eat some meat, and then the whole organic movement. And in general, it's what fits a
Hmm.
lifestyle best. There are great epidemiological studies, great long-term studies. If you look at individuals living to be 100 on the Mediterranean diet, for
Yeah.
instance, or usually it's a stress-free, it's really good whole food type of environment, lots of daily movement.
Yeah.
Um, and so I go, but from a nutrition standpoint, I don't necessarily have a favorite
Yeah.
type of diet. You can ask the RDs about that as well. I mean,
Hmm.
if there's a medical-based diet, that's something where an individual should seek medical advice. And I'm not a registered dietitian,
Yeah.
so um, it goes back to, is a person willing to do research
Hmm.
on a certain diet if it resonates with them, but do they respond well to it? There are even exercise. There are responders and non-responders to different types of exercise, to different types of diets. And
Gotcha.
so a lot of the time, if something resonates or it's a goal of someone to try a certain diet because their friend was on it or they heard really positive results, give it a try, but take a month or two to read about it and
Right.
to then make up recipes to be able to maybe have a cheat day. And what does that look like?
Right.
To me, looking at a specific diet helps you clean house with potentially a poor diet because now
Right.
you're going to focus and be a little bit more educated. Hopefully, like I said, do your homework on now being planned and deliberate about how you eat, what you eat. But let me go back to the lifestyle. A lot of these diets tend to be not just a diet, it's a whole lifestyle. It's
Right.
what, and it's something where does the family buy in? Does it fit
Yeah.
that
Do you have the
lifestyle?
money?
Well, I think
Do you have
I
the
mean,
money to do it? You know,
they
some of those are expensive.
they can be, but I think everybody needs to buy food in one way or another.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really, if you add it up, your health is priceless. So I
Yeah.
think you can eat healthy no matter what the budget. I think there's a myth out there that that's overly expensive to eat healthy.
That
Um,
is.
but
Do you
I
think it's worth it to spend the extra dollar?
I think it is, but I don't think you have to. I don't. I think if you're smart about it and you watch, and again, that's it's educating yourself on the ingredients, how to read a
Hmm.
food label properly, and learning to buy
Yeah.
foods in a manner that's not. It doesn't have to be. I don't think overly expensive.
Yeah. What do you think stops people from seeking that education out? Because it's not that hard to acquire.
Gosh, Connor, another great question.
Sorry.
I think it's just, I think we're always looking, me included, sometimes for the quick fix. You
Hmm.
want to believe that this is the one thing, so we tend to just take things at face value, and I think we should always pause a little bit and really look for the evidence. And so, for me personally, if I have a condition and I'm required to take a medication, even having a knee surgery, I try to
Mm-hmm.
do a little bit of homework on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the number one thing we can do as consumers, based on some of the things occurring, is to educate ourselves. And if we have a passion to change law, to change legislation, to affect change at that level, then become an activist
Yeah.
as well. So I admire people that arm themselves with evidence and want
Mm-hmm.
to change certain laws or change a culture's philosophy. But for me personally, it's really about educating myself and making the best choice, for me and taking in advice from trusted family and friends.
I just want to give a huge shout out to Scott Drum once again for being on the show. I really appreciated the opportunity to sit down and talk with him. He has been a great role model for me, not only in the classroom but in everyday life. He's taught me more than just strength and conditioning, sports science, exercise science, but he's taught me how to be, a wholesome person and how to treat others in the professional realm. So once again, thank you, Scott Drum. Thank you to our sponsors. Until next time, guys. Ride the waves, dude.